Dear students, I welcome you to this lecture. Initially, we will try to discuss what intelligence is all about, and then we will be discussing the famous two-factor theory of intelligence, its relevance, and after all, we will see some of the challenges or the criticism leveled against the same theory. Intelligence is the ever talked about subjects in psychology. Human beings are more unique and superior to other living beings in many aspects, the most important of which is intelligence. Success in schools and colleges and in one's own profession, social adjustment, possession of general information, etc., are part of the meaning commonly associated with the concept intelligence. Some researchers have suggested that intelligence is a single general ability, while others believe that intelligence encompasses a range of aptitudes, skills, and talents. Researchers have proposed different definitions of intelligence. According to Alfred Binet, intelligence involves abilities such as understanding, originality, persistence, and self-criticism. According to Wechsler, who is famous for intelligence testing, he says intelligence is the aggregate or global capacity of an individual to act purposefully, to think rationally, and to deal effectively with the environment. Students, there are so many definitions. While these definitions vary considerably from one theorist to another, current conceptualizations tend to suggest that intelligence involves the ability to learn, means the acquisition, retention, and the use of knowledge is an important component of intelligence. Again, it is recognizing problems. To put knowledge to use, people must first be able to identify possible problems in the environment that need to be addressed. Then again, solve problems. People must then be able to take what they have learned to come up with a useful solution to a problem they have noticed in the world around them. Intelligence involves some different mental abilities including logic, reasoning, problem solving, and planning. While the subject of intelligence is one of the largest and most heavily researched, it is also one of the topics that generate the greatest controversy. Now, let us see what Spearman's two-factor theory is all about. Charles Spearman, a British psychologist who lived from 1863 to 1945, was a very prominent professor of psychology associated with the Department of Psychology, University of London. His work influenced a number of important psychologists who came after him. For thousands of years before Spearman, intellectuals and philosophers worked to understand the concept of intelligence. Although Spearman loved philosophy, like many others of his generation, he wanted to do more than just speculations. To accomplish this, he brought the scientific method to intelligence testing. For Charles Spearman, understanding why some people grew up to be great thinkers and learners and why other people struggled to grasp even the simplest thing had both practical and philosophical implications. By observing and measuring intelligence in a systematic way, Spearman believed researchers would be able to define all the variables that influenced the differing levels and types of intellectual ability people have. More importantly, research would discover how these variables fit together. British psychologist Charles Spearman, known as an early founder of the psychological testing movement, refined the methodology of intelligence testing, including the statistical techniques then used to analyze test results. Spearman's work on intelligence appeared in A Measure of Intelligence for Use in Schools and The Abilities of Man, Their Nature and Measurement. His most renowned piece of work was an article in the American Journal of Psychology, and that appeared in 1904 and was titled General Intelligence, Objectively Determined and Measured. This article and Spearman's many other workings are considered the fundamental building blocks for many intelligence theories. His greatest theoretical contribution was proposing the theory of the G factor, in which he argued that general intelligence formed the bedrock from which all other mental abilities developed. After using a technique known as factor analysis to examine some mental aptitude tests, Spearman concluded that scores on these tests were remarkably similar. People who performed well on one cognitive test tended to perform well on other tests, while those who scored badly on one test tended to score badly on others. He concluded that intelligence is general cognitive ability that could be measured and numerically expressed. Hence, general intelligence, abbreviated as G, is a psychological term used to describe the trait or quality common to scores in all intelligence tests. Spearman calls this general factor as the general fund of cortical energy. For example, students' grades tend to be positively correlated even across seemingly unrelated subjects. That is, a student who receives A's in biology probably gets A's and B's in other subjects. According to Charles Spearman, who proposed the idea of G, some dominant cognitive factor must be responsible for this effect. Terming it differently, Spearman suggested that there is something which might be called as general intelligence, a sort of general mental energy running through all the different tasks. The amount of G in a person depends on the amount of cortical energy present, and the maximum quantum of this is fixed. How much of this energy one utilizes depends on the motivation, available environment and previous experience, etc. In addition to this general factor, there are specific abilities which give an individual the ability to deal with specific problems. For instance, an individual's performance in Hindi is partly due to his general intelligence and partly due to some specific aptitude for language which he might possess, that is G plus S1. Or in mathematics, his performance may be the result of G plus S2. In drawing, it may be due to G, that is general intelligence, G is equal to S3, that is specific ability third, and so on. The factor G is thus present in all specific activities. The total ability or intelligence A of an individual thus will be expressed by the equation G plus S1 plus S2 plus S3 so on and so forth is equal to A. So, according to the English psychologist Charles Spearman, intellectual abilities are comprised of two factors, namely the general ability known as G factor and specific abilities known as S factors. The performance by the individual is determined by the G factor and the S factors. The total intelligence of the individual is the sum total of the G factor and the S factors. The performance of a particular task depends on the G factor or general ability and the particular S factor or specific ability. The theory was expounded in the famous book of Spearman, that is The Abilities of Man, which was published in 1927. The essence of this theory, in his own words, was that all branches of intellectual activity have in common one fundamental function or group of functions, whereas remaining or specific elements of the activity seem in every case to be wholly different from that in all the others. We can say that on the basis of this, intelligence is composed of two factors, one G factor and the other S factor. This G factor is involved in all walks of life, and S is a special factor which is exclusive and is shared by none. There are a large number of specific abilities such as ability to draw inferences, ability to complete sentences, ability to code messages, artistic ability, musical ability. These specific abilities are independent of G factor. S factors are largely affected by education and training, whereas G is innate as well as uneducable. G factor represents native intelligence. Thus, when we respond to any situation or perform an intellectual task, our general mental ability or G factor is mainly responsible for it, and our specific ability in that particular task is responsible for the rest. To visualize G, imagine a Venn diagram with 4 circles overlapping. Dear students, you can look at the figure. In the middle of the overlapping circles would be G, which influences all the specific intelligences, while S is represented by the 4 circles. Though the specific number of S factors are unknown, a few have been relatively accepted, that is mechanical, spatial, logical and arithmetical. Different individuals differ both in their G as well as S factors. For example, an individual's performance in literature is partly due to his general intelligence and partly due to some specific aptitude for his language, that is G plus S1. In mathematics, his performance may be the result of G plus S2. In drawing, it may be due to G plus S3, and in social sciences, it may be due to G plus S4 and so on. Thus, the factor G is present in all specific activities. As already said, general intelligence, also known as G factor, refers to the existence of a broad mental capacity that influences performance on cognitive ability measures. It is pertinent here to note that all people do not possess these two factors in a uniform manner. Various cognitive functions will require varying amount of G. Certain operations such as arithmetical reasoning or even vocabulary requires a high amount of G. Another activity such as musical appreciation or manual dexterity may depend more on a spatial ability and less on general factor. The individual's performance in any test, therefore, would depend on both general ability and specific abilities. Two tests which depend mostly on general ability will show a high correlation, while two tests depending mostly on different specific abilities can have only a low correlation. Charles Spearman first described the existence of general intelligence in 1904. Students, now let us go through the characteristics of this general factor, that is G factor. First, let us try to define this general intelligence. G, the general factor, experts in the field of intelligence have defined it as a very general mental capability that, among other things, involves the ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, and learn from experience. General intelligence may more generally be defined as your ability to reason, solve problems, decide, learn, and act successfully in the pursuit of your valued goals. David Wessler, the creator of the most widely used psychometric IQ test, the Wessler's adult intelligence scale, defined intelligence as the global capacity of the individual to act purposefully, to think rationally, and to deal effectively with one's environment. Now, let us see the basic characteristics. First, G factor is universal inborn ability. Number 2, it is general mental energy. Third one, G factor remains constant. Number 4, the amount of G differs from individual to individual. And the fifth one, it is used in every activity of life. Sixth one, greater the G in an individual, greater is his or her success in life. Seventh one, G factor is general mental ability towards different tasks. Eighth, amount of G differs from individual to individual. Ninth one, it is used in every life activity. Now, let us see what are the characteristics of S factor. S factors or specific factors refer to separate, single, and specific activities and abilities. The individual scores on each of the specific ability tests represent the S factors. An S factor score represents a person's ability within one particular area. Put all the S factors together and you will be getting the G factor. Commonly measured S factors of intelligence include memory, attention and concentration, verbal comprehension, vocabulary, spatial skills, and abstract reasoning. In a related theory, psychologist and intelligence research pioneer Louis Thurston came up with a theory of intelligence called primary mental abilities. It is basically the same concept as the S factor, part of the two-factor theory with a little more detail. For Thurston, intelligence is represented by an individual's different levels of performance in 7 areas: verbal comprehension, word fluency, number, memory, space, perceptual speed, and reasoning. Now, here are the basic characteristics of S factor. Number 1, it is learned and acquired in the environment. It varies from activity to activity in the same individual. Individuals differ in the amount of S ability. S factor is specific capacity that helps the person to deal with specific problems, and it is this S factor which varies with the intellectual activity. For example, one's performance in physics is equal to G plus S1, in maths it will be G plus S2, and in English it will be G plus S3. Number 6th characteristic, different activity requires different combination of G and S. 7th one, S factor is influenced by education and training. 8th one, it is learned and acquired in the environment. 9th one, it varies from activity to activity in the same individual. Individuals differ in amount of S. Mass of S is unlimited. And the last one, that is the 12th one, we can improve S factors. Dear students, G factor represents native intelligence. Thus, when we respond to any situation or perform an intellectual task, our general mental ability or G factor is mainly responsible for it, and our specific ability in that particular task is responsible for the rest. Thus, we see that Spearman did not believe in the concept that mental power is independent of one another. According to him, they are unitary. Those who hold this view believe that intelligence can be measured and expressed by a single number, such as an IQ score. The idea is that this underlying general intelligence influences performance on all cognitive tasks. General intelligence can be compared to athleticism. A person might be a very skilled runner, but this does not necessarily mean that the same person will also be an excellent figure skater. However, because this person is athletic and fit, he will probably perform much better on other physical tasks than an individual who is less coordinated and more sedentary. Thus, we see that Spearman did not believe in the concept that mental power is independent of one another. According to him, they are unitary, as I have already told you. Although proponents of multiple intelligence theory reject this interpretation, factor analysis remains one of the most important tools in the 21st century intelligence research. Now, dear students, let us go through some of the challenges to the concept of general intelligence. Is intelligence a singular factor or does it have several facets? In scientific circles, the discussion is lively and ongoing. The British scientist Charles Spearman postulated that there is one dominant general intelligence factor that governs all cognitive abilities. Not everybody agrees. Some claim that there are multiple intelligence factors which are more or less independent. According to these scientists, a person could, for example, be very good at maths but very bad in memory related tasks. The notion that intelligence could be measured and summarized by a single number on an IQ test was controversial during Spearman's time and has remained so over the decades since. Some psychologists, including L. Thurston, challenged the concept of the G factor. Thurston instead identified a number of what he referred to as primary mental abilities. More recently, psychologists such as Howard Gardner and Sternberg have challenged the notion that a single general intelligence can accurately capture all of human mental ability. Howard Gardner suggested in his theory of multiple intelligences that intelligence is formed out of multiple abilities. Gardner instead proposed that different multiple intelligences exist. Each intelligence represents abilities in a certain domain, such as visual spatial intelligence, verbal linguistic intelligence, and logical mathematical intelligence. He recognized 8 intelligences: linguistic, musical, spatial, intrapersonal, interpersonal, logical mathematical, bodily kinesthetic, and naturalist. He also considered the possibility of a 9th intelligent ability, that is existential intelligence. Gardner proposed that individuals who excelled in one ability would lack in another. Robert Sternberg agreed with Gardner that there were multiple intelligences, but he narrowed his scope to just 3 in his triarchic theory of intelligence: 1 analytical, 2nd creative, and 3rd one practical. He classified analytical intelligence as problem-solving skills in tests and academics. Creative intelligence is considered how people react adaptively in new situations or create novel ideas. Practical intelligence is defined as the everyday logic used when multiple solutions or decisions are possible. Students, research today points to an underlying mental ability that contributes to performance on many cognitive tasks. IQ scores, which are designed to measure this general intelligence, are also thought to influence an individual's overall success in life. However, while IQ can play a role in academic and life success, other factors such as childhood experiences, educational experiences, socio-economic status, motivation, maturity and personality also play a critical role in determining overall success. There are strong arguments to support the theory of one general type of intelligence. There is a very high correlation between IQ and very simple cognitive tasks, which supports the theory of one general intelligence. Even in later research by Gardner, his results showed that each of his 8 intelligences correlate positively with each other. After further analysis, Gardner found that logic, spatial abilities, language and mathematics are all linked in some way, giving support for an underlying G factor that is prominent in almost all intelligence in general. When Sternberg analyzed his data, the relationship between the 3 intelligences surprised him. The data resembled what the other psychologists had found. All 3 mental abilities correlated highly with one another and evidence that one basic factor G was the primary influence. The foremost argument in support of one general intelligence is the fact that there is a high positive correlation between different tests of cognitive ability. Spearman, in doing his research, administered to many people different types of tests covering several different areas of cognitive ability. When he examined the results of these different tests, he found that there was a positive correlation between the tests for a given individual. In other words, if a certain person performed well on a test of verbal abilities, then that same person also performed well on another test of another cognitive ability, for instance, a mathematics test. Spearman named this positive correlation among tests as the positive manifold. This positive manifold was also called the general intelligence factor. This is the single factor that determines the intelligence of the individual. Jensen supported the theory of one general intelligence by stating the positive correlation between all cognitive test items is a given and inexorable fact of nature. This positive manifold led Spearman to find a large first factor that was dubbed general intelligence or G. To Spearman, all tasks on intelligence tests, whether they related to verbal or mathematical abilities, were influenced by this underlying G factor. Many modern intelligence tests, including the Stanford-Binet, measure some of the cognitive factors that are thought to make up general intelligence. These include visual spatial processing, quantitative reasoning, knowledge, fluid reasoning, and working memory. Visual spatial processing involves such abilities as putting together puzzles and copying complex shapes. Quantitative reasoning involves the capacity to solve problems that involve numbers. Knowledge involves a person's understanding of a wide range of topics. Fluid reasoning involves the ability to think flexibly and solve problems. Working memory involves the use of short-term memory, such as being able to repeat a list of items. Now, dear students, let us go through the educational implications of the Spearman's two-factor theory. Number one, the theory gives a better insight to the teacher about the nature of intelligence. The general ability differs from individual to individual. The specific abilities also differ from individual to individual. S factor varies in degrees, therefore it can be modified by learning or habitual training. A child requires different amounts of G and S factors for achieving success in different subjects. We do require a high quality of G factor for our success in life. Both G and S have a high correlation. This theory could be used to guide construction of a set of ability tests. Dear students, to conclude, let us make an emphasis on the fact that the British theoretical and experimental psychologist Charles Edward Spearman was an influential psychologist who developed commonly used statistical measures and the statistical method known as factor analysis. His studies on the nature of human abilities led to his two-factor theory of intelligence. Whereas most psychologists believed that mental abilities were determined by various independent factors, Spearman concluded that general intelligence was a single factor that was correlated with specific abilities to varying degrees. Spearman's work became the theoretical justification for intelligence testing. Sternberg and Gardner, as well as many others, believe that intelligence can be defined by a single factor. Whether that single factor be termed as positive manifold, neural processing speed, or G, the complexities of the human mind and its processes can be reduced to a single factor defined as intelligence. The theory allows us to test intelligence accurately and gain a better understanding of the different types and how they relate to each other. This can be used to individualize and assess learning and academic performance. It can also help us to create a better understanding of how different levels of general intelligence influence the specific abilities of a person. Dear students, it was all for today. Hope that you might have enjoyed this session. Thank you.